must be wondering if it's possible for me to get such images with my smartphone which is comparable to a cinema camera. Apparently it is possible, and in this video I will show you guys how you can master mobile filmmaking under 10 minutes, because let's be honest, when I compared my iPhone with the Sony FX3 which costs you over 4 lakh rupees, I was shocked how close the iPhone was. Now I'm not saying that iPhone is better than the cinema camera, no, but what I mean by here is that you have a very capable device with you all the time right under your pocket, and trust me, carrying your camera every place you go could be painful sometimes, and we all know that. Now in this video we will be learning about mobile filmmaking specifically, but if you want to learn more about filmmaking, editing, and also learn the business side and making money part, you can check out our full course Voyage Filmmaker, where I teach you everything in detail about content creation, cameras, how to shoot in various scenarios, and also how I get paid in dollars with the help of foreign clients. You can find the link in the description, or you can head over to voyagefilmmaker.com and check it out by yourself. So basically in this video I'll be giving you 6 tips of how you can master mobile filmmaking, and the tip number 1 is to shoot in manual mode. Now when you're shooting with your smartphone, please avoid using the camera app that you find with your phone, because you don't have any control over your settings and everything works automatically, and honestly you don't want these kind of exposure changes happening to your image. Instead, download external apps such as Blackmagic app for iPhone, which is completely free, and if you're an Android user you will find many alternatives for the manual app, but the one that I like is Filmic Pro, and these apps will let you change every camera settings manually. Tip number 2 is to master the manual mode. So now that you have full manual control over your camera, let me explain you the 4 important aspects that you need to master inside of the manual mode. Those 4 are frame rate, shutter speed, ISO, and white balance. Let's start with the first one, which is the frame rate. A frame rate is basically total number of still frames or images which is taken per second. So when you are watching a video, basically you are watching multiple images or frames played back to back per second. So if we shoot at 24 frames per second, it will basically have 24 images or frames played back per second. And if we shoot at 60 frames per second, it will record at 60 images or frames per second. And the real question arises here is that which frame rate should I use? Well, this completely depends upon different scenarios. Like if you want to shoot action type of shots where you have no intention of slowing down your shots, you must shoot at 24 frames per second. And if you want this good looking slow motion videos, then you must shoot at 60 frames per second. And remember that if you're filming content for Instagram, I'd recommend filming at 30 frames per second. The second aspect is shutter speed. Now I won't be going into too much detail about this topic because this could be a bit tricky and confusing, especially if you're just starting out, and basically this deserves a video in itself, so do subscribe and I will be uploading that soon. But in this video though, I'll be explaining the right way of how you can set your shutter speed. So if you set your frame rate to 24 frames per second, you will have to make sure that you set your shutter speed to 1/50th of a second. And if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, you will have to set your shutter speed to 1/120th. And this is because there is basically a rule where we have to set the shutter speed twice the frame rate, because when you set like this, you will get this natural looking motion blur that our human eyes can see. And if you wave your hand in front of your face like this, you can see the motion blur that I'm talking about. Now remember that when you set shutter speed twice your frame rate, it's going to get a hell lot of bright. So in order to cut down the light, you will need something called ND filter, and it basically acts as a sunglasses of the camera. And if you don't have the budget to buy an ND filter, only then I would recommend you to crank up the shutter speed. Moving on to the third aspect is ISO. Now ISO basically adds some artificial light into the image, and this could be really helpful in low light situation, but keep in mind that if you crank up that ISO, it will also start to introduce the noise to your image and it will make your image look soft. So try to keep the ISO as low as possible in most of the scenarios to get better quality. Moving on to the fourth aspect is white balance. Now when you're shooting a video, the prime goal that you must have is to make sure that the whites in your image is actually looking white and not any other color. For example, if you're shooting outdoors, you have to make sure that your image either don't look too warm or too cold. And what I suggest is, if you are shooting at afternoon on a sunny day, set your white balance to 5600 Kelvin, which is the daylight temperature. And also during the sunset golden hour, set it to somewhere between 5000 to 6000 Kelvin, because we don't want to lose that orange glow. So basically these are the 4 aspects that you must know in the camera as well as in the smartphone. And if you master how you can use all of these settings in different scenarios in a right way, then you can be called as a professional and you can get some amazing shots. Now moving on to the tip number 3 is to shoot with different focal length. Now most of the smartphone cameras get multiple lenses and each lens usually gets different focal length. For example, in an iPhone we have 3 lenses, one for standard lens which is 24mm, we have one for telephoto lens, and we also have one for wide angle lens. So for creating establishing shots, use wide lens, and to show the subject you can use the standard lens, and for more detailed shots you can use the telephoto lens. Tip number 4 is to shoot at highest resolution. Now especially while shooting on a phone, I always prefer to shoot with 4K because the sensor size of the phone are usually small and I want it to produce as high quality as possible. And I would also recommend you to turn off the image stabilization because sometimes it may look quite unnatural. Tip number 5 is to stabilize your footage. Now if you plan on shooting on phone exclusively, I would recommend you to buy a gimbal which are specifically made for phones, just because they are a lot cheaper compared to the ones which you get for camera, and they look a lot more professional than you just holding a phone and walking something like this. And moving on to our last tip is to avoid low light situations. Now this is a huge one because we have to understand that the sensor size of the phones are usually small. It's pretty obvious that it's going to perform worst in darker situations. So I highly recommend you to avoid filming in low light situations or at night times with your phone. At day times it's okay because it does a pretty good job, but at night times I would never recommend that. So there you have it guys, these are the tips that you can follow to master your phone camera under 10 minutes. And again, if you are serious about filmmaking and content creation, and if you want to learn more about these aspects, you can check out our full course Voyage Filmmaker, where I teach you everything about making content with your phone as well as with your camera. And also I'll be covering the business side of it as well, on how I find potential clients that pay me huge number of amounts. So you can head over to voyagefilmmaker.com or you can head down to the link below and check it out by yourself.